The sun hung low over the sleepy village of Willowbrook, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets and gilding the thatched roofs of the cottages in gold. The air was thick with the scent of freshly baked bread and the distant hum of bees in the apple orchards. But in the heart of the village, beneath the sprawling oak tree that stood as its centerpiece, a lazy dog named Rusty lay sprawled in the dust, his paws twitching in his sleep as he dreamed of chasing rabbits he would never catch. Rusty was a fine-looking dog. His coat was a rich, reddish-brown, his ears flopped adorably over his eyes, and his tail, when he bothered to wag it, could clear a table in a single sweep. But Rusty had one fatal flaw: he was bone lazy. While the other dogs of Willowbrook herded sheep, guarded farms, or at least barked at the postman, Rusty did nothing. He slept. He ate. He occasionally lifted his head to watch a butterfly drift by, but even that was too much effort most days. The villagers, who had once found his laziness amusing, now shook their heads in disappointment. "That dog," old Farmer Higgins would mutter, "is a waste of good food and a fine coat." Even the children, who usually adored dogs, had given up trying to play with him. "He just lies there, Grandpa," little Lily had said one day, her voice tinged with sadness. "He doesn't even want to fetch a stick." Rusty, of course, didn't care. Life was good. The sun was warm, the grass was soft, and the villagers, despite their grumbling, always left out scraps of food for him. Why should he work when the world provided so generously? But one day, as Rusty dozed beneath the oak tree, his ears twitched at the sound of a clatter. He cracked one eye open and saw a bone, a big, juicy, meaty bone, rolling across the cobblestones. It was the kind of bone dogs dreamed about, the kind that made their tails wag and their mouths water. And it was heading straight for him. Rusty's instincts kicked in. He leapt to his paws, his body coiled like a spring, and snatched the bone in his jaws just before it rolled into the gutter. The villagers, who had been watching, let out a cheer. About time that dog did something useful. Farmer Higgins called, his voice gruff but not unkind. Rusty, his tail wagging for the first time in weeks, trotted off to a quiet corner beneath the oak tree, his prize clutched tightly in his teeth. Finally, he had something to call his own. But Rusty's joy was short-lived. As he settled down to gnaw on his bone, he noticed something, a reflection. In the still water of a puddle beside him, he saw his own face, his jaws clamped around the bone, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. And then, the reflection moved. Rusty blinked. The bone in the puddle was bigger, juicier, more tempting than the one in his jaws. His ears perked up. "That bone looks better than mine," he thought. "I should have that one instead." Without a second thought, Rusty dropped his bone and lunged for the reflection, his jaws snapping at the water. But the moment his teeth broke the surface, the reflection vanished. Rusty splashed around, his paws stirring up the mud, but the bone was gone. He looked back at the real bone, now lying in the dust where he had dropped it. It was still there, still juicy, still perfect. But Rusty, ever the optimist, decided it wasn't as good as the one in the puddle. "Maybe if I try again." He picked up the bone, trotted to another puddle, and dropped it once more. Again, the reflection tempted him. Again, he lunged. And again, he came up empty-jawed. This went on all afternoon. Rusty dragged his bone from puddle to puddle, dropping it, chasing the reflection, and each time, he ended up with nothing but mud on his nose. The villagers, who had been watching with growing amusement, began to laugh. "That dog's dumber than a sack of hammers," one of them called. Rusty didn't care. He was determined. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, Rusty was exhausted. His paws ached, his jaws were sore, and his once pristine coat was now caked in mud. And his bone? It was gone. He had dropped it one too many times, and now it was lost in the tall grass, probably snapped up by some sly fox or a hungry stray. Rusty sat beneath the oak tree, his tail drooping, his ears flattened. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never felt before: regret. That night, as the villagers gathered around the fire in the center of the square, Rusty slunk to the edge of the light, his belly rumbling. He had spent the day chasing a dream, and now he had nothing. No bone. No dinner. Not even the scraps the villagers usually left for him. He watched as the children roasted marshmallows and the adults shared stories, their laughter warm and inviting. But Rusty was too ashamed to beg. He had been given a gift, a perfect bone, a chance to enjoy something wonderful, and he had thrown it away, literally, for the sake of a mirage. As he sat there, his stomach growling, he noticed Lily sitting a little apart from the others, her eyes fixed on him. She had always been kind to Rusty, even when he ignored her. Now, she stood up, her small hands clutching a piece of bread and a scrap of meat, and walked toward him. Rusty's ears perked up. Maybe, just maybe, his luck was changing. Lily knelt down in front of him, her voice soft. "Here, Rusty. You look hungry." She held out the food, her eyes filled with pity. Rusty, for the first time in his life, felt a pang of shame. He had spent his days lazing around, ignoring the people who cared about him, and now here was Lily, offering him kindness when he had done nothing to earn it. He took the food gently from her hand, his tail giving a weak wag. "Thank you, Lily," he seemed to say with his eyes. Lily smiled and ruffled the fur on his head. "You're welcome, Rusty. But you know, if you weren't so lazy, you'd have your own food. And maybe even a bone or two." Rusty's ears drooped. She was right. He had spent his life taking the easy way, and where had it gotten him? Hungry, muddy, and alone. As Lily returned to the fire, Rusty made a decision. Tomorrow, he would change. Tomorrow, he would work.
The next morning, the sun rose over Willowbrook, painting the village in hues of pink and gold. And for the first time in his life, Rusty was awake before the villagers. He stretched, his muscles stiff from the previous day's exertions, and trotted to the center of the village. Farmer Higgins was already there, unloading a cart of fresh vegetables. Rusty sat in front of him, his tail thumping against the ground, his eyes fixed on the farmer. Farmer Higgins looked down, his eyebrows raised. "Well, look who's up with the sun. You here to beg, Rusty?" Rusty shook his head. He didn't beg. Instead, he barked, a sharp, clear sound that made Farmer Higgins jump. Then, Rusty trotted to the cart and, with his teeth, gently picked up a sack of potatoes that had fallen to the ground. He carried it back to Farmer Higgins and dropped it at his feet. The farmer's eyes widened. "Well, I'll be. That dog's actually working." He scratched Rusty behind the ears, his voice gruff but warm. "All right, Rusty. You can stick around. But you gotta earn your keep." And so, Rusty did. That day, he herded sheep with the collies, his sharp barks keeping the flock in line. He guarded the chickens from a sneaky fox, his growls sending the predator slinking back into the woods. And when the villagers saw his efforts, they rewarded him, with scraps, with pats, with kind words. By the end of the day, Rusty was exhausted, but his heart was full. He had earned his food. He had earned their respect. But the real test came the next day. As Rusty trotted through the village, his nose to the ground, he caught a familiar scent, bone. His ears perked up, and he followed the smell to the butcher's shop, where a fresh batch of bones was laid out to dry in the sun. Rusty's mouth watered. He could take one. No one was looking. But then he remembered the lesson he had learned. Laziness causes problems. If he took the easy way now, he would be right back where he started, hungry, ashamed, and alone. So instead of snatching a bone, Rusty sat down in front of the butcher, his tail wagging. The butcher, a burly man with a kind face, looked down at him. "What's this, Rusty? You want something?" Rusty nodded. And then, he did something he had never done before, he worked for it. He spent the next hour helping the butcher carry meat, sweep the shop, and even chase off a few pesky crows. And at the end of it, the butcher handed him a bone, the biggest, juiciest one in the shop. "Here you go, Rusty. You've earned it." Rusty took the bone in his jaws, his heart swelling with pride. This time, he didn't drop it. He didn't chase a reflection. He carried it to a quiet spot beneath the oak tree and gnawed on it with satisfaction, his tail thumping against the ground. For the first time in his life, Rusty understood the joy of earning something. The bone tasted sweeter because he had worked for it. The villagers' praise felt warmer because he had deserved it. As the days turned into weeks, Rusty became a new dog. He was still the same reddish-brown, floppy-eared, tail-wagging Rusty, but now he had a purpose. He herded. He guarded. He even, on occasion, fetched sticks for the children. The villagers, who had once seen him as a lazy nuisance, now looked at him with respect. "That dog's a worker," Farmer Higgins would say, his voice filled with pride. And Lily, who had always believed in him, beamed every time she saw him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the village settled into the quiet of the night, Rusty lay beneath the oak tree, his belly full, his heart content. The children gathered around him, their small hands stroking his fur as they told him stories. Lily sat beside him, her head resting against his side. "You're not lazy anymore, Rusty," she said, her voice soft. "You're the best dog in Willowbrook." Rusty let out a happy sigh. He had learned his lesson the hard way, but he had learned it well. Laziness causes problems. But hard work brought happiness, respect, and the sweetest bones a dog could ever hope for. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Rusty closed his eyes, his tail giving one last, contented thump against the ground. He was no longer the lazy dog of Willowbrook. He was Rusty the worker, and he wouldn't have it any other way.